we need to understand that, yes, what we think does manifest things, and and the previous histories that we've all been born into are also contributing. We're co-manifesting all of this.
Today I'm sitting down with Alex Ebert. Alex is a singer, songwriter, and composer. He's well known for being the lead singer and songwriter for the bands I'm a Robot and Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. His music has appeared on multiple movie and television soundtracks. He was one of the songwriters who contributed to the score of the Broadway musical SpongeBob SquarePants, the Broadway musical, for which he won an Outer Critics Circle Award for Outstanding New Score, and was nominated for the Tony Award for Best Original Score. Today, Alex is also known as a social media thought provoker on subjects affecting humanity as a whole, such as our cultural dissonance, spiritual bypassing, and New Age and the Religion of Self, the title of his latest article for Bad Guru. He uses his platform to help humanity act more humanely. Alex, how do you define yourself? Let me get you on gallery. There we go. Hello, Alex.
Hi. Boy, it's the toughest question, I think. How do you define yourself? Well, by hopefully the activities, the projects, not the subjectivity, because I don't know what I think of myself, but I do know what I try and do. Yeah, and I think that, you know, what I think we all try and do, hopefully, is to try and make this world a better place. And we have our different theories for how each of us think we can contribute. Some of those theories are that the best way we can contribute is to make ourselves as rich as possible and be an example of wealth for others, to inspire them to be wealthy too, like Wallace D. Wattles in The Science of Getting Rich in 1910. So, which started a lot of the New Age, New Thought confluence of spirituality and capitalism. So for me, when I think of like what I want to try and do for people, is try and free myself from the chains of selfishness. So sort of the inverse of that, ideally. Obviously, we all have this sort of primacy of self, and I do too, and we take care of ourselves, and our sort of the survival of the self is important, and we want to not die. But I think that thing that I'm after in my own personal life is sort of, the very top of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that transcendence of self. So you have the self-mastery. Okay, I'm actually not that interested in mastering myself. I want life to master me. I want to be married with it. And to that end, I try and, the activities I try and embark on here hopefully reflect some aspect of that. So that I can slowly transcend my own, megalomania.
Well said.
Yeah.
As always with you, I find so many ideas. Whenever I read, you are one of the social media accounts that has really gotten me through the COVID, the last 13, the COVID. I sound like my grandma.
The COVID.
Yeah. Of this pandemic for the last 13 months, because you are just chock full. If anyone who's listening to this hasn't yet checked him out, is it Alex Ebert? What is your handle again on Instagram?
It's Alex_Ebert.
Yeah, and I can
apparently
post that.
There's someone that's just Alex Ebert out there.
All right.
More me than I am. Yeah.
But what you have been posting in your videos, and again, for the audience, by videos right now, I'm not talking about Alex's music videos as a musician. I'm talking about his talk videos that he has been very putting out, so many, very proficient and eloquent in these videos on talking about a number of subjects. And your listening to you was very helpful this last 13 months. A lot of your ideas, they're very thought-provoking, and it's what we need to hear right now. So I really appreciate it. So let me ask you, let me just back up for a sec. And again, when I read your articles, I mean, there's like, I have so many, I'm like, yeah, I agree. Yeah. Oh yeah. So there's like every sentence is chock full in your like 25-page articles. But let me back up and ask you, Alex, why the name Bad Guru?
So at first I thought that, satire would help inoculate those who hadn't already been captured by the religion of self. And what I started seeing about a year and a half ago now, well, okay, I saw it really ramping up about a year and a half ago, but as early as 2006, when I first read The Secret, I got really nervous for the New Age movement. I was like, whoa, okay, this is a strain of New Ageism I didn't really know about. The thing that really, its focus on materialism was one thing. Like, this is how to attract a car. This is how to attract a marriage. This is how to attract a house. I was like, okay, but it was its insistence on how the law of attraction works in reverse that really worried me. And that working in reverse refers to people who suffer tragedies having attracted those tragedies themselves, people who suffered oppressions having attracted those oppressions, people who suffered through slavery having attracted the slavery. And suddenly I was like, wow, this is, and that's not me extrapolating. Rhonda Byrne, Rhonda Byrne, who wrote The Secret, she responded in an email regarding 9/11 Katrina by explicitly stating that the frequency of the victims were vibrating at the same frequency of the events, that they attracted those events. And it's a radical form of selfishness that I couldn't help but notice worked so well to like buttress this selfish capitalist, sort of like late capitalist me mentality of like that also dovetails, it's like the flip side of good vibes only. If I'm only accepting good vibes, then that means anyone who's suffering, I'm literally not accepting into my life. I can't handle them. They have to change themselves first. So you're suffering from cancer, you created it. You're not it's nothing to do with your environment. Forget the fact that BP spilled a bunch of oil into your drinking water. It's you who vibrated at that frequency. And suddenly this total disregard for the collective responsibility really started to worry me. But I was like, New Agers, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Are they going to take over the world? What, are they going to become president? And then, and then one became president.
Right.
And what's fascinating is, it's still worth repeating. Trump is a second generation New Ager. He at 6 years old, he was in the church, one of the apostles of Norman Vincent Peale, whose book, The Power of Positive Thinking, is like one of the big seminal New Thought law of attraction books. And Trump and Fred Trump, his father, were apostles of Norman Vincent Peale. So when Trump says things like, I know COVID better than anyone, or when Trump did anything, or when he insisted that he had more people at his inauguration than Obama, when you see the photos, he had literally a third of the people at his inauguration. And then Kellyanne Conway says, well, when Trump says he has more people, those are alternative facts. As soon as I heard that, I was like, holy shit, we are now in, not only, forget the postmodernism, post-truth, we are now in the new age alternative fact zone. It's a whole different thing than distrust in truth. That's the postmodern sort of take, is like, oh, truth has been disrupted because we no longer trust it. This is not that. This is, I create my own reality. This is pure New Ageism. And as soon as I sort of started putting all this together, it's like, wow, this we need to start speaking out about this, because our Declaration of Independence is reducing itself to the individual. We need a declaration of interdependence to sort of steady this in and keep it within the realms, not because I care so much about keeping society together. It's because I care about the universal law of interconnectivity. It's because I care about the fundamental underpinnings of existence, being that we're all interrelated. And
Amen.
all of that, the premise for empathy, the premise for caring for your neighbor, is not some moralistic projection that we have. It's not additive. It is a realization of the underlying reality that we're all related, and that everything we do affects one another, even everything we think. You know, I don't suffer from scientism. I believe that everything I think is affecting everyone else. I believe in stuff that is sort of, you know, I believe everything's physical, first of all, but I believe in the sort of non-physical. I'm you know, a metaphysician. So it's not that I'm anti-New Age. I feel like I'm more New Age than the people that are saying that they're siloed hubs. Those are capitalists. And so that's when I started really speaking out about this stuff. And about a year and a half ago, I realized that one of the best ways to address this, I thought, was satire. And I started making fun of the sort of the ironic selfishness, especially in the context of a pandemic, but just sort of the ironic selfishness of the New Ager, of the person who's, you know, creating their own reality. And but eventually I realized that, you know, I started seeing other people in social media start doing the same thing with satire. So I was like, okay, that's sort of handled. The satire is being handled. What I'm more interested now in is actually really parsing through this stuff and speaking at length about some of the minutia and some of the details. So I just kind of kept the moniker in large part because I've always well, number one, I want to ward off any followers or devotees. The worst, you know, like I don't want to be a guru, and the gurus that you literally can trust the least are the gurus who say that all gurus are bad. So I want to make it doubly known that, like, I'm a bad guru. Do not follow me. And when I say that, doubly distrust me, because maybe I'm trying to trick you into being like, oh, he can follow you. No, none of that. And whenever I've seen, there's only one guru that I've had any like feeling of like, okay, I can listen to this guy, and that's Prajnanananda, who's like a descendant of Yogananda. And but everyone else, I've literally got, every time I've met a guru, I've gotten either their devotees ask me to leave, or I've gotten in direct confrontations with. It's not for me.
Wow, so much there. Thank you.
I overspoke. I way overspoke. But in a nutshell, bad guru is just it's just a perennial reminder for me to keep my head right, for everybody else to keep their head right, about anything I put out. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And, you know, it's funny. I mean, guru, one of the great teachers and mentors in my life is named Guru Singh. He and his wife and family are based in Los Angeles. Big master teacher from the Kundalini yoga tradition, and just an incredible man. And guru literally means that, you know, bringing, now, of course, I'm going to completely botch it, and I say this to myself every day, bringing the light, oh my God, the light that comes from darkness, right? Gu is darkness, Ru is light. So the light that comes from darkness. So that was like, oh yeah, I like that. I get that.
No, it's the best. It's
yeah.
The best.
But I appreciate what you're saying. And I just want to back up a little bit what you were mentioning. So interesting about The Secret and Rhonda Burns. I mean, yeah, there's this whole idea of that everything that has happened to me and that I get and is all because of a thought pattern. Now, I agree to a large extent with that thinking. If I'm going to be thinking negatively about myself and everything around me, that's not going to help me move forward in the way that I need to and want to be of service in the world and all of that. So it is important with this thought pattern, right? We have three brains: our head brain, our heart brain, and our gut brain. And they have to, we're way too head brain oriented, and the other two need to come up. But with this, thought patterns are important. But in order to help ourselves, the interconnectivity, as you focus on all the time, it's not me, or because I have a, God, cancel. I have a dreadful disease. That's all because I was thinking poorly. Is so not, it's missing the larger picture.
Well, it's also negating the reason why manifestation works to begin with, which is the interconnectivity of us all. So we think something out there in the universe is connected to us. It's all connected. It responds to us precisely because we're all interrelated. So
right.
The interrelativity is the fundamental reason why, manifestation works to begin with. So the very idea that, we're living in siloed different realities, and that when I'm a sovereign being, when I finally achieve like sovereignty, that is some sort of implacable state of, non-permeable self,
right.
is totally erroneous. And
yep.
So that's really the main problem, I think. And you're right, though, because what we really need to cultivate in society, I think, and this will probably just be my lifelong mission, because it's going to be so difficult, because we're really going up against biology, but is, as opposed to cognitive dissonance, which we really sort of breed ourselves for. We're really binary, and we like these sort of like tribalistic choices, these binary choices, is cognitive harmonics. We need to understand that, yes, what we think does manifest things, and and the previous histories that we've all been born into are also contributing. We're co-manifesting all of this, so that you can't say that some kid that's born into slavery manifested slavery.
Right. Oh my God. Sorry to interrupt, but just infuriates me. Exactly. Go on.
No, that's it. It's just, and that runs all the way down the line, from poverty to, all of it. And, we're all co-manifesting. And in fact, a very important point, thank God, just to have a happenstance of etymology, is that manifestation, the late Latin, manifestare, literally means to make public. That's what manifestation means, make public. So personal manifestation, personal meaning of or belonging to oneself as opposed to anyone else, is an actual oxymoron. And what we're really doing when we say manifestation is co-manifestation.
Yeah, amen, amen. And I just want to go back also for people who are not familiar with Norman Vincent Peale. When Alex mentioned, again, the phenomenon of Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, 1952, Donald Trump, excuse me, sorry, typo, forget Donald for a sec. Norman Vincent Peale, his quote, one of the things he said, the ability of the mind to create its own more positive reality. And I just wanted to ask you about that. You've already gone so much into this, but how this message has flipped to the dark side. Also, another quote, he said, any fact facing us, however difficult, even seemingly hopeless, is not so important as our attitude toward that fact, Peale wrote. A confident and optimistic thought pattern can modify or overcome the fact altogether. And I think this is where, as you've just been saying, and I feel we get stuck in, because part of me goes, yeah, absolutely. And then I was like, whoa, wait a second. So it isn't just about me. It's about all of us. Again, interconnectivity, which you're always stressing. And how did this get so off that we're in a place of spiritual bypassing to such an insane degree, and what's going on out there? Go.
Well, it's interesting. There's two questions in there. One is how does a truth, like, the implicate power of the mind, of thought, which affects form, like thought interacts with form, because all substance is really just a gradient of substance. We have thought, we have mass, we have energy in between. It's all sort of in one gradient. So when we're thinking things, like photons are supposedly massless, but because they're never at rest, they're only massless at rest because they're always carrying light. They have energy, which means that operationally speaking, they actually have mass. Everything is part of this sort of stratum of substance. So our thoughts affect forms. That's not a difficult thing for me to swallow, and I don't think it should be difficult for anybody to swallow. So these ideas that your thoughts can overcome the fact, now we start to get into sort of simplifications, reductions. Which fact? Like, what fact are we talking about here? Like, can it overcome the fact that, like, I have blue eyes? Okay, well, let's just say I can change my eyes into purple. How? What kind of thought are we talking about? How long do I have to study? How powerful is it? Do I need more people to help me with this? Because I'm thinking purple and it's not happening, right? So then we start to live, in our own sort of, we start to silo and invent our own realities. And what's really interesting about this moment is as we disembody into the internet age, as more and more of our identities become abstractions, we're able more and more to live in a scenario where we think that our minds are actually creating our circumstances, because we're being further disembodied from realities that are much more difficult to manipulate with your mind. So like, I can't just make this door disappear. I fucking wish I could. That would be cool.
Well,
and one day maybe I can, but I'm working on it. But so far, like, no luck. But the more I disembody from the physical, I can start to sort of experience myself as God. And what's interesting, as technology makes this more and more apparent for us, and we live more and more in the ether, I think when you asked the second part of the question, which was how come we're so focused on the idea that the mind can fix everything, that the mind can make all of our dreams come true? Why? Well, there's a really simple, one part of that answer is super simple, because life is hard. And so if we think that we can just think ourselves out of any situation, that makes things easier. It's especially, not enough props gets given to how difficult guilt is. Guilt's not easy. And when you're successful, or when you're born into an affluent position, the associated guilt is something that has to be grappled with. When you live amongst degradation, but you've been born into some affluent position, it's very easy and attractive to want to think, well, I must have manifested this. I must have somehow done something right. And so we end up in a very similar, New Ageism and Hinduism, the caste system, are very, very identical. Whereas the Hindu system has an interlife, where, okay, I'm born into this, so I must have done something shitty or something amazing in my past life. And that qualifies me, and I no longer feel guilt because I earned this. And in the American sort of capitalist system, it's you have to earn it right now, whatever your position is right now. So those who are more wealthy must intrinsically be somehow also more spiritually gifted. And that association between piety and affluence, which is basically nowhere in the Bible, quite the opposite. And and I only bring up the Bible because in the 18th century, as I mentioned in that essay, in the 18th century, evangelicalism,
mm-hmm.
In particular, was really rough on capitalism, because capitalism was just burgeoning. A lot of the ecclesiastic class of Christianity was like, wait a minute, none of this is in comportment with any of the New Testament, and as well as some of the Old Testament passages. How are we making sense of this? And the Christian socialists in England were born, and over here by 1925, 25% of the ecclesiastic class of evangelicals were actually registered socialists.
Amazing.
But then you had you had new thought come along and sort of rescue capitalism by spiritualizing the selfishness. So you had people like Emerson and transcendentalists being like, oh, self-reliance, and you had stories of bootstraps and this rugged individualism, but none of it really rose to the level of spiritualism. And then suddenly you have this idea of the law of attraction, and you reify this idea that spirituality and capitalist advancement are one and the same. They're part of the same apparatus. And so you advance now up to 1952 with Norman Vincent Peale and Donald Trump, 6-year-old Donald Trump in Norman's church. And him saying that, and of course, Trump's dad was a real estate developer and, all about the money. And then you have this, reiteration of a positive and optimistic thought pattern can overcome the fact altogether. And then you cut to Donald Trump in 2007 saying there's a deposition, and they ask him, the lawyer, Michael Cernesky or something, says, how much are you worth? And Trump goes, well, it depends how I feel. And Michael Cernesky, and the lawyer goes, I'm sorry, let me understand that further. You say your net worth or your worth, your whatever, depends on how you feel. And Trump goes, yes. Sometimes I feel bad, blah, blah, blah. He goes into a bit of detail, and then he goes, but I try. And he's not, I think what people miss is that Trump's not bullshitting. He's not lying. He's literally just applying what he learned from New Age, New Thought rhetoric. And once we end up in that space where Trump, who was born a millionaire, is now applying this sort of worldview of self-advancement through his own thinking, you end up in some interesting territory. And it's not that Trump is wrong. Look what happened. He became the president. Look what has happened from his own sense of self-empowerment. So we have to at once acknowledge the power of positive thinking, to use Peale's phrase, and the implications of thinking just for yourself. And it's just a tough dance, So you end up with people who are like, fuck New Ageism. It's all selfishness, fuck individualism. And then that misses the picture. And what you end up with, of course, as what we have to suffer through in society is just this pendulum swinging, always past zero, overcorrection for overcorrection. And what I'd like to try and land us on at some point is just like, well, straddling both, incorporating both, and somehow existing in the center.
Yes. And Alec, thank you for that. And it made me go to a part of your article that addresses this, again, your recent article in Bad Guru, what you were just saying made me think of trauma. Trauma, what is at the base of so much is unhealed trauma, right, in people. So just to read, I'm going to read a little bit of what you put in your article attributing, that Carl Jung, psychologist Carl Jung, presaged much. These are your words. Psychologist Carl Jung presaged much when he posited that the denial of our, quote, shadow self, that is, the aspects of us that are not positive thoughts, results in neurotic, disintegrated states. The idea being that when we avoid our darker natures, they manifest anyhow, only in more uncontrollably damaging ways. Made me think of, when you were speaking about Trump, his father, what we know of Fred, all the unhealed trauma that everyone has in family history to a certain extent, and how let me continue. And you wrote in your article, as Jung explains it in Archaic Man, quote, projection is one of the commonest psychic phenomena. Everything that is unconscious in ourselves, we discover in our neighbor, and we treat him accordingly. Your words now. In other words, when we do not integrate our unconscious fears, we tend to project their darker natures out into the world. Demons abound. Hollywood liberals feast on the adrenal glands of sex-trafficked children. Marina Abramovich becomes a witch, etc. You gave examples of blah, blah, blah. And then you say everything is connected. not in the smiley woo-woo way, in the bad trip way. I have to just continue. I'm sorry to, I didn't want to, I want to hear from you, but let me just, because you make me
No,
think
go
so
ahead.
much. So, and you continue, Alex, the perfect neurotic inversion of the erstwhile good vibes only new age trope. What starts out as a seemingly innocuous call sign of strict positivity toxifies into a neurosis so complete that it makes a biblical hellscape of the external world, all in an effort to keep the vibes good and the self right. So just something about all of that with, I just thought about that, and trauma, when we're unhealed trauma, is at the base of so much of when people go into the wellness world. Oh, there's so much I want to ask you. I have to keep it clear. This is what I do. I get a little overwhelmed sometimes. Thanks you for your patience. We go into wellness world and either we're working on that trauma or we're not. And what is the wellness world? And how were these people then the ones who suddenly start spiritual bypassing? And then some of them end up in the January 6th insurrection, and what just happened? And the whole idea of conspiracy theories, which I wanted to also read to you. Well, read to you, relay the idea, or speak about the idea here, that America was formed and built on a conspiracy theory, really. I mean, the whole idea also of the, which came, I think, more 19th century, but city upon a hill, the shining city upon a hill, right? It has no sure footing if there is no accountability for the actions of how this country was started. They kill all the people who originally lived here and chain and kidnap the people from Africa, which of course the Portuguese and the Catholic Church, I don't know if I can say they started, but they had a lot to do. Okay, so truth and reconciliation for the horrendous ills that the early European settlers perpetrated against the First Nation that kidnapped Africans. So this whole idea, are we that surprised that we are where we are with these conspiracy theories running rampant? If there's so much unhealed trauma, if we've never as a nation addressed, like South Africa had to do with truth and reconciliation, I mean, my God, what do we expect? Of course, we're going to be a mess. And how do we get out of it, Alex? What do you have to say?
Well, I think that first of all, one aspect of the cure, I guess, if you will, is admittance. There are a ton of legitimate conspiracies. There are a ton of legitimate nefarious actors who have truly riddled us and plagued us with reason to distrust. And, you know, those of us who would read, you know, various sort of people's histories type books, pre-internet, knew about this stuff. We talk about it. And as files, you know, there were Pentagon files and whatnot that would get disclassified from time to time. And as they were, you know, unclassified and made public, and you know, we got to sort of read about, for instance, the Gulf of Tonkin not being a legitimate cause for Vietnam, and even, you know, Roosevelt knowing that Japan was going to bomb Pearl Harbor several hours beforehand, but just simply not reacting because he needed a reason to convince, you know, the American public to enter the war. These sorts of foibles were, everything you said is correct. We couldn't, with the invention of the internet and suddenly the ability for us all to sort of share and disseminate conspiracies and you know, relatively new or undergirding facts of things that we had always taken to be you know, the mainstream dominant narrative. And suddenly now we're sharing this. It's really shaken everything up. And there's a comedian who's like, who knew that once we had access to all the information, we would become more stupid? And it's not that we become more stupid, but we become, it's like paralysis by analysis. It's like, holy shit, if this is fake, you know, in any relationship, we can understand this. Someone lies to you once, and suddenly when they tell you that they're eating a cheeseburger, you're not so sure. And that's basically, you know, what's happened. And the only way to rectify those kind of relationships, which we have with power, so this is a relationship with power, is for power to disrobe itself. And you're like, okay, the jig is up, I get it. You guys know a lot, but you're also now making shit up because now you're totally paranoid. I understand why. This is everything. And that's going to be a really long process because we're not going to trust and we're going to need to dismantle. And I don't think there's any easy way around it. There's been too much hijinks at high levels of power, and there continues to be. So when people, get really concerned about whatever Bill Gates or Davos or whatever thing that people are concerned about, there's cause for concern because the history has proven that there's all kinds of weird shit going on behind our backs. So there's no real easy answer for the conspiracy thing. But to your point about trauma, which I think is really relevant. So we have these historical traumas that, of course, if power doesn't cop to, and we don't properly assimilate, so guru, the lightness from the dark, if we don't bring that integration of darkness into the light, then we end up generating a collective neurosis, for sure. I 100% feel that, believe it, I think it's demonstrably true. Slavery is one example, but there are millions of examples. Just millions, innumerable examples of traumas that go unintegrated, not only at the cultural level, but on the personal level. And the Good Vibes Only thing is a perfect example of denial of the shadow self. Now, one thing that I think is interesting to bring into this, so of course there's events that are traumatic, but one thing that we're terribly avoidant of in general is death itself.
Ah, yes.
And this avoidance of death itself, it can't quite be classified as a quote trauma, but it is an avoidance of the shadow self. It's an avoidance of the fear. And I think, there's an interesting corollary between cancer and selfish behavior, where a cancer cell is almost like defined by its refusal to accept its own cellular death. It's called apoptosis. Right. And apoptosis is programmed cell death, where the cancer cell, where cells, the body gets rid of, and any organism gets rid of either toxic or old or redundant cells in order to make way for regeneration. But cancers, when some of those cells say, no, I'm not going to abide by apoptosis anymore, I'm not going to commit myself to my own death for the sake of the whole, I'm going to self-replicate. I'm going to replicate myself in avoidance of death, in avoidance of apoptosis. And so I just think it's such an interesting parallel to society. When we do not integrate the death state and we insist on living for as long as we can, or we're in a fear or in a state of avoidance, what ends up happening, of course, is that we start to calcify our personal membranes, our cultural or tribal membranes. And I think that that's a direct result of disintegrating the formless, the universal, whatever, what we perceive as the void. When we disintegrate that and live in an avoidance state, where we're avoiding the void, we end up sort of reifying and calcifying our personal membranes to keep out death, self-replication. And what ends up happening, of course, there's all the analogies we're used to from the Matrix and whatnot of like we're a virus and we become an extractive virus that is self-replicating. And I just think that it's really worth looking at that relationship between cancer cells avoiding apoptosis and us avoiding death, culturally and personally. And I think that the reintegration of death rituals, of initiative sort of rituals to really vivify us, because there's nothing that creates more vitality, in a sense, than confrontations with fear,
Yes.
and to make us more alive.
Yes.
And I really think there's a relationship between the integration of death and a subsidence of extractive behavior. You know what I mean?
The reintegration of death and the say it again, please.
A subsidence, a settling, a calming of extractive behavior, like, oh, me, I got to get this, I got to get that, I got to get the oil out of the ground, I got to get rich. All of this sort of frenetic, pretty much like sort of pathologically selfish behavior, I think in some ways is related to death avoidance.
Yes, absolutely. And it makes me think of what you just said again, so much there. What you resist persists. I mean, again, we're used to all these little expressions, but I mean, death is inevitable. So it's that doesn't quite apply to, but you know, I had on my list of questions here the idea of reintegrating death into life, and there you just rolled right into it because you're very vocal about this. Certainly, I believe in a few of your recent videos on Instagram that I found very, very fascinating. And Alex, if I may ask you, and then you'll want to discuss this or not, obviously up to you. You have stated that for 3/4 of your life you were suicidal.
Yeah.
Speaking of death, and how you found that the remedy, and this was just awesome, for that the remedy for so many of life's trials is you got to be corny. You know, I wanted you to talk to me about the idea of our inner jester guiding us out of the dark forest, because I think this all plays into what we've been talking about. I mean, we're going to die. And then, so you stop resisting it, people. Let's unearth this, what's going on. And I have a total inner cornball in me. And I think all of us do somehow. I'm getting more used to her as I go on. I'm so happy I'm embracing her more and not trying to be, you know, something that I thought I had to be. Right. So that inner, you gotta be corny.
Yeah, I think that's really key for me. So to trace the corniness thing to death and then back, status anxiety, in my worldview, is why we all, that's the invisible hand that Adam Smith, that's the guiding force. That's the actual underlying fundamental law of any interaction, is status anxiety. And some people, you know, you could call it social anxiety, but then people would be like, I don't have social anxiety. Yeah, well, you do have status anxiety. I promise you. And because we have, well, let's just go back. Why do we have status anxiety? And to just really clunkily say, in a nutshell, because we fear that we will die without status. Because if we don't belong to a tribe, we may shiver and die out in the wild by ourselves. So we have this built-in, integrated, functional, biological sense of anxiety when our status may be in jeopardy, right? So we flush with adrenaline and embarrassment, all those things. And I put on a shirt, and I make myself look presentable just now because I'm slightly anxious. so because of all that, this is sort of operating our interactions, right? Now, for me, depression, suicidal ideation, they're inextricably linked to status anxiety. So much of the reason for our depression are linked to other people, interactions that we've had. What will so-and-so think? Oh, my dreams aren't coming true. The things I wanted to have happen. All of the interactivities that create any of those anxieties, in my experience. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, a traumatic event doesn't also create suicidal ideation. And I've had traumatic events that I'm sure have contributed to the reasons for any suicidal ideation. But of course, in a total vacuum, disinterrelated from other people, I would think I would probably not have suicidal ideation so much as just suffering from like total loneliness. But the point being that status anxiety itself and our liberation. So what is the impedance to being goofy? What is the impedance to being a corny motherfucker? What is the impedance to just being a kid and acting like a fool? The impedance is status anxiety. So if we can recognize that the only impedance to us just being ourselves is what we think other people will think of us, and what sort of what suffering, like how our status will suffer as a result, we can start to, I think, start to sort of attack and have fun with the very idea of goofiness as something that we're all involved in. And I also think that that translates itself not just to corniness and acting a fool and being a child, which is so important. I'll tell a really quick story that I think I told on Instagram. I was depressed for like 6 months. Actually, two stories. But the first one, I was depressed for 6 months. I was walking off an airplane. I was just sort of like in a depressive state. I was walking off an airplane. I saw this kid, maybe 4 families ahead, walking, deplaning. And the kid is like 7 years old, 5 years old. And he's walking around, bumping on stuff. He's looking up at the sky. He's going like, he's kind of skipping, he's banging on the railing. And so no one's looking. I start imitating him. And I make sure nobody sees me, and I start doing the same thing he does, and I'm imitating everything this kid does. By the time I get into the terminal, my depression had like lifted, and it stayed lifted, because all I needed was to be a child again, not to bring Jesus back into it. But when, it's amazing how many actual gems are in, the New Testament. But they're like, how do I get to the kingdom of heaven? He points at a child, be like a child, be like this child. When I start suffering from adulthood, when that enclosure starts, suffocating me, being a cornball, being goofy, being a child brings it all back. Having wonder again, just wonder at everything that's happening. And it sounds simple, but it's something that we really easily forget because of status anxiety, because we're so used to trying to fit in and and conform to whatever people think. And oh, he's at this elevated status. I used to say with Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, when we go on stage, it's like, my profession is unprofessionalizing professionalism. This whole professionalism thing, that's killing me. I've got to unprofessionalize this. And just before, probably my most suicidal, most depressed state was just before starting Edward Sharpe. And I was about 26. I was just in a bunch of predicaments that felt really deadening. I stopped meditating for years, because I was actually afraid of my own meditations, because I was trying to stay sober, and I was only reading the big book. I was in AA, and I had a girlfriend, and we were in a house because I thought that was what was, I was supposed to do. And I was on a major label, and I was writing songs just so that they could get played on the radio, not from my own love of things. I had become a robot. So my band name, I'm a Robot, really became like my life. And I started getting like really depressed. And then finally I was like, oh my God, I think I'm going to kill myself. Like, but this time I'm sober. Like before I was like, yeah, sure. I'm gonna, and I was suicidal all the time. But this time I was like, no, like, I think I'm over it. But maybe, let me think back to the last time I felt really vital. And I went back and back and back and back when I didn't care, back. And all of a sudden I was like back to the age of 5. Like, okay, why 5? And suddenly I remembered I was in this elementary school. And I remembered this class, this music class, with this teacher named Ruth from South Africa. And she would play these songs on a guitar, and all the kids would bang and sing together out of tune and bang on tambourines. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, I don't have any instinct on this. This is pure mental exercise. I'm just going to pretend I'm a kid. And there's no instinct. I have no like, ooh, yeah, I'm going to pretend. There was nothing. It was just like, all right, I guess I'll pretend I'm a kid before I kill myself. And I start pretending I'm a kid. No feeling. I'm just like, okay, oh, I'm a kid. Yeah, hi. Just total faking it. But then I start writing music as if I'm a kid. And all of a sudden, something started to happen. I no longer was writing songs with verses and choruses and form. I was just sort of like writing. And step by step, within just that, maybe a matter of like 10, 15 days, um, my whole world started to change. I I I got rid of my cell phone. I got rid of my internet. I had to break up with my girlfriend. She was great. We had to break up. I had to get out of my house. I stopped driving. Um, I I started behaving like a kid, and it was a really scary time because a bunch of my friends, especially in AA, I was like, "Hey guys, I can't do the fear-based institution anymore. Cool for you, like it worked, but I have to, I can't." Now. And I lost a lot of friends, and they're like, oh, you're gonna, and they can't hang out with me now because now I'm a bad influence. And suddenly then I started, reassembling my childhood into my, like, integrating my child. And then that became the premise for the whole vibe of Edward Sharpe. I let people in the band that weren't even musicians. It was all about disregard for the impingements of sort of what we profess to be an evolved state of sort of either profession or being, and returning to a place of pre-status anxiety. And it's interesting having a kid and watching her start to confront status anxiety, start to confront like, oh, okay, I want to present this way, I want to present this way. Oh, I'm afraid of these kinds of people, and seeing how that, these impingements start to mold your being, but then also watching her overcome the impingements. I mean, like, okay, you know what? Fuck it. And it's an amazing project. She's far more developed in that way than I was at her age. But yeah, I think there's something there. There's also something important there with regard to everything we're talking about, which is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And you know epistemology, and oh, I know this and this, and I have a real sense of all these differential elements, and I know this is this, and I can put this here, and all of this clarity, making clarity out of complexity. Yeah, okay, but what about the clarity of confusion? Where's that? Where is the I don't know? Where's the shrug? Where's the letting in God? Where's the vesselhood? Because the beautiful thing about the childish thing is this, right? It's like, because when you do this, you no longer contain the content, the contention that disrupt or impede the flow of the universe through you. And so all of this stuff about knowledge and I know who I am, who are you? Figure out who you are. Well, maybe it's not about figuring out who I am as some sort of static entity, like a brand, but maybe relieving myself of that and allowing it to flow through me. And I think that we have, when we talk about all of this, conspiracy, what really happened? Who am I really? Like what group are you? Like, are you woke or anti-woke, or are you this or are you that? Like, are you Republican? Or are you Democrat? Like, what are you? And really these defining states, which I think are actually a problem. Like it's all part of the same network of reifying abstractions. And once we just sort of let some of that go, there's two things that happen, and they're part of the same thing. Becoming the child reintegrates us in some ways with the death flow, with the life death flow, because we sort of have to let go of our sense of firmness, our sense of
Control.
control and calcified form, and just sort of like let things go floppy. And I think that there's something there. So like the return of death initiations, which ironically happen typically right around the time you stop being a kid, and because we've lost that, we enter this adulthood phase in this sort of like, yeah, frenetic state where we're sort of like, we haven't confronted the things And so we're just sort of like our adulthood is sort of marked by death avoidance, as opposed to, an integration of all that power.
And that's why rituals like the Jewish people have the bar and bat mitzvahs. Cultures from every continent of old, certainly, around 13, the age of 13, there was a ritual to welcome you in. That means something. So you're grasping. So to be childlike, and I'm completely with everything you've said, great. But it's also being a mature adult who's responsible in the world, in the best sense of that.
No, you're right. I mean,
I don't want to be the age that I'm at and just be childlike. You didn't say that at all. I just want to reiterate that and make that point, because it's that balance of that remaining childlike, which we as artists, I've been in front of the camera my whole life, in fashion world, and then acting for a while, and you're a musician, beautiful. So this whole thing, entertainment industry, you're so encouraged to just, right?
Right, that's true, yeah.
Which is great, Alec, which is great. And it's, again, we're all different. Some of us respond to that, some of us don't.
Yeah.
What I'm doing now, I'm retaining that artist in me, doing it this way. But I have to also be the mature adult in the world who's conscious and responsible, which is what you're saying and where you're coming from with everything we've spoken about, too. So it's that balance somehow, too.
It is. And it's again the cognitive harmonics. It's like, yes, okay, so now you're going to be a child. And you're just gonna what? And so your adult isn't gonna be present. You're just gonna cry when you don't get toast buttered the way you want it to. Right. It's like it's that balance, and I guess it's an oscillation. Really, is what it is. It's like we go from we reach into, or for me, I reach into my childishness to sort of bring some of that energy, to grab some of the universal flow into the chalice of my being, to be the vessel, and then I deliver whatever it is that I accrued, whatever gold I managed to sort of siphon from the universe and deliver it. And then that starts to calcify, and it's like, okay, I have to go back and not know again. And so I guess that that flow, and as Jefferson noted back in the day, it's like, well, there should be a big revolution every 200 years or whatever he said, to bring some of that sort of I don't know back into it, to sort of have that oscillation so that systems don't calcify. But of course we're afraid of that. And I guess just even letting go, as you said, to be a child again is a kind of a death. It's a kind of an ego death. And so it's all sort of related, this acceptance thing,
I could speak to you for hours, as I'm sure everyone says when they're speaking with you. And I would like, if you have some time, because we're kind of at the hour point,
Sure.
to have a couple of more questions.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I allotted another 30 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, great. And I got to tell you, I would love ultimately to speak with you and Guru Singh together, because I find there are so many similarities between the two of you, both musicians. You're both really highly informed, conscious people. No, but it's true. And just big-hearted and big-spirited. And there's so much. I know him very well, he and his family. I just adore him. And it's so interesting. You're kind of a young version, but you're completely your own people. So it's a huge compliment I'm saying to both of you. But anyway, if that should come about, that would be so awesome to have you back with Guru Singh. I think it would be fascinating to speak to both of you together. But some things we've really already touched on, but I had some of your quotes. It just wasn't all that easy for a privileged white man to find a personal oppressor.
Manufacturing oppression. Yeah, boy, this conversation would actually get me in some trouble, but I do want to touch on it really briefly, because it's important. We only so I'll just say it like this, because unfortunately this wades into culture war stuff. But though I'll just speak directly to people out there. Let me just try this. If you find yourself in a situation where you don't have enough oppression, and at first this might seem really strange to you. What do you mean enough? I don't want oppression. Well, maybe not. Maybe you've transcended the need for heroism, maybe, but probably you still look for ways to battle, still look for ways to reify your heroic. So even if it's just, oh, I battled traffic today, whatever it is, we tend to look for convenient oppressions that we can lionize ourselves against.
Mhm.
If you happen to find yourself in that predicament, my suggestion is, instead of manufacturing a hardship that is convenient, look to the hardships of other people that are very extant and pre-existent and very, very, very big Goliaths, and see if you can pitch in and make those Goliaths part of your heroic journey, so that we can all pitch in together to fix them. Yeah.
And interconnectivity, going back to all the themes that you were speaking of before. And yeah. Let me just see what else we just went into anti-woke and the oppression compulsion, and this quote, thought crimes and struggle cluster. But I'm wrapping up here. So let me just see, Alex, and this also we touched on, but I like to ask this question to my guests. You have a marvelous sense, and it ties into what we're talking about. You have a marvelous sense of wonder, curiosity, and awe. You do. Awe has been found to expand our perception of time, enhance our well-being, make us more generous, boost our immune system. And talk to me about your admirable sense of wonder, curiosity, and awe, which is the childlike, the best of the childlike, and why these are needed when healing ourselves, mental, emotional, physical, what have you, as well as needed in today's world. If there's anything else you'd kind of want to touch on.
I think that awe is the portal to gratitude. For me, that's how I access gratitude. And thankfully, awe is a really easy portal. And I try and express this to my friends that are really cool, who just want things to just sort of happen.
Right.
You kind of have to forget about like that. You kind of have to take the bull by the horns. And one of the easiest horns you can grab is awe. You can fake awe. You can fake it. And the beautiful thing about awe is, as soon as you fake it, it's real. Because it's inescapable that anything I look at, I can be amazed by. I can be amazed, especially anything natural, but even everything I'm looking at in this room, I don't know how it was put together. I don't know how I'm here. I don't know how I'm even in existence. I really don't know any of it. It's very easy to access that state of awe. And as soon as I access that state of awe, I have an intrinsic sort of like rush of gratitude for just even existing. It actually makes me emotional. Just even being able to exist in a single moment, just of sentience, is in and of itself some kind of fucking heroic miracle. To be able, furthermore, to survive a moment knowing that moment will pass, that death will occur, is in and itself an amazing heroic feat, emotionally heroic. To know that there's a sort of transience to everything, and or that you're speaking to me, like that you're there, that we have intersubjectivity, that we're able to sort of even speak the same language to agree on anything. All of it may sound so pedantic and stupid and base and childish, but if you can access that state of awe, like that kid that I was following while he was getting off the plane, he was in a state of awe. The way and that was the first thing that came to me. The way he was looking up at the sky was like he saw it for the first time. The way he was touching the railing, it's like he just found out what a railing was. Or to breathe as if it's your first breath, to taste air as if it's the first time you're tasting air. Like, what is this stuff? Even if it's just a pretend, fakery, it's not, because it's all really pretty fucking magical. The idea that nothing, that this substance between us is actually, connecting us, that we're all sort of swimming in a soup. And now I'm inhaling the same stuff you're inhaling, all of it, whatever trick you need to do. And awe is the portal to that gratitude. I used to have this aversion to gratitude. People sit down at a table and be like, let's go around the table, say what we're grateful for.
Right.
And I'd be like, you know what? This is some bullshit. First of all, gratitude, because the kind of gratitude that I was found strange was this gratitude that was in comparison, this relative gratitude. Well, I could be poor, so I'm excited. I'm very grateful that I'm not this. I'm very grateful that I'm not that.
Right.
And instead, I'm just very grateful to experience. I think is a great starting point, you know? So yeah.
And that's so beautiful. I'm with you. And so many people are. And so finally, Alex, what is the message you most want to get across to people right now?
Wow. Okay. I'll say something that I don't know if any of you, well, I guess this is something that isn't said often. All of this stuff is okay. The overcorrections of the pendulum, they're okay. The intertribal mimetic madness is okay. Even the over conspiratorializing of life is okay. All of it's okay. It's part of the dialectic. It's part of these overcorrections. You know, when you have woke, and then you have people freaking out about woke, and they're anti, and all of these things are okay. And if we can just hold them all, not become inactive, but just hold them all as part of the process, then they can all start to sort of congeal towards something like a center. And I don't mean center politics. I'm definitely not a centrist, but they can congeal toward a center that represents like something like truthfulness. And the most fundamental truth, I don't think this is debatable, is interrelativity. And once we can understand that these swings, that even, you know, even the most horrible things that are happening to us personally, we've got to all understand all of this stuff as part of a process. That doesn't apologize for it. It doesn't make them okay, but it does make them part of a collective process. And I just think people tend to lose sight of that. And that's also okay. But the more we can hold the energy of the myopic with the wisdom of the meta, I think the faster the myopic will get solved, the faster we can actually solve some of these problems. And hold each other through it, you know, and allow for actual conversation. Yeah.
Hold the myopic. Say that again. It was really good. Hold the myopic with the something of the meta.
With the perspective, hold the energy and the problems of the myopic. So yep. You know, the smaller problems, the things that we get lost inside of, while maintaining the perspective of the process.
Yep. The acceptance. Yeah. Alex Ebert, it is such a pleasure to speak to you. I thank you so much for your time. And again, I'm just like feeling, woo, and there's so many other things we could talk about, but this was so awesome. And I thank you so much.
That was really fun. Thanks, Claudia.
Yeah. Thanks. Have a wonderful weekend.
All right, you too.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Oh, Alex, wait. Oh gosh. Please tell us where we can find you. Social handles.
So on Instagram is really the main thing I'm on right now. It's Alex_Ebert. Yeah.
Great. And I'll put that in the text of this for Thrive Global and my YouTube channel. Thank you again, Alex. Have a magnificent day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.